Here's something nobody can explain. Right now, you are experiencing this video. You are hearing words. You are having thoughts about those words. There's something it is likely to be you in this moment processing this sentence. See, that experience, that type of inner life has no scientific explanation, and not a partial explanation either. There is literally no explanation at all for that. We can map out every neuron that fires in our brains, and we can trace every chemical signal, and we can even go as far as watching the exact moment our visual cortex processes light into meaning. But none of that tells us why any of it feels like something. Why isn't it just processing happening in the dark with nobody home? See, the gap between physical mechanisms and the inner experience is a hard problem that we deal with in the consciousness. David Chalmers named in 1995, we are no longer closer to solving it. And that unsolving problem is about to become very urgent. So in labs right now, scientists are growing human brain tissue from stem cells. And no, that is not a metaphor. It is not in the future. It's not some dystopian movie that I'm explaining the plot. That is literally happening right now and has been for a while. They're calling them brain organoids. They're clusters of human neurons that self-organize. They form connections and start behaving like a brain tissue. The medical case for this is genuinely exciting from the scientific perspective and really just interesting if you're not really into it and more of a layman. Drug testing specific to your genetics and modeling neurological diseases before it happens sounds like a huge advancement. Now, when I was first doing research for this video, when I was reading this part of it, I couldn't help but think about back then when doctors were able to manipulate newborn genes before they came out the womb to get certain hairstyles, colors, or athletic ability. And that's where my mind first went. And that was known as recombinant DNA technology or simply genetic engineering. So the scientists and doctors were able to create synthetic human insulin in the early 80s and by using viruses to transfer genetic material, which that sort of paved the way for what we're seeing today. And man, has it skyrocketed. So being able to model neurological diseases before it happens will help everyone understand brain development without animal testing, which I thought was weird in a way because we've done animal testing for as long as we can remember for literally things that are purely cosmetic for us, example, makeup. So for that to be like a huge motivator for us into diving into this unknown territory of growing brain cells because we get to get away from animal testing seemed a little bit odd to me. I understand the benefit in it, right? But it just seemed odd that, oh, okay, we're not going to test on animals anymore. That should be a big benefit. A little fishy to me. In any regard, doing so is nice, but some researchers want to go even further. So they want to know if biological neural tissue can compute, if it can learn, or if it can be placed inside a system that interacts with an environment. Now, holy crap, right? We basically want a biological artificial intelligence. And the hope is that with these new intelligence, we can become way more efficient in figuring out hard problems. In 2022, researchers grew neurons in a dish and taught them to play Pong. They called it dish brain. In 2024, the NSF funded projects to connect organoids to robotic systems and to give them a body, to be able to see what happens when biological neural tissue has something to respond to. And they called these embodied systems. And this is where it's a hard problem of consciousness stop being abstract. We established that nobody can explain how physical matter produces inner experience. It's not in you, it's not in anyone, which means we also have no reliable way to detect whether experience is present anywhere outside of ourselves. So you can't tell me if that fish has an inner experience or not, even if you strongly believe it does or does not. And that's where the big issue comes with these embodied systems and these organoid dish brains and petri dishes where we're growing human brain cells. It seems like a huge ethical problem, yet we're still pushing forward in the research.
So, for humans' only reason or basis for understanding consciousness is by inferring it in other humans and extending that grace to animals, whether we understand it or not. Knowing that we have similar nervous systems and evolutionary history aids in us believing that everyone has it. These organoids grow in a lab and they're placed in these robotic bodies. They don't have that evolutionary history. There's no behavioral baseline, and they're just simply human neurons. And while they're just that, they're increasing in complexity as they continue to thrive and as they continue to receive more inputs and produce those outputs. So with us, there's no framework to determine whether anything is happening inside, but with them, we can kind of see it. So what most researchers are agreeing on is sentience, whatever it may be and whatever it is, it requires a certain kind of complexity. These neurons are talking to each other in integrated hierarchical ways. It produces a system that unifies information rather than just processing it in parallel streams. So the more complex the system is, the more complex it starts to look like the architecture that produces experience in us humans. Brain organoids are currently simple, right? But nowhere near the complexity of a developed brain, nor the efficiency, but they're scaling, and the research is definitely accelerating. Although there's no agreed upon threshold, the complexity curve where someone has decided this is where we start asking the question seriously has not been drawn. There's not been a line drawn there, and there's no regulatory frameworks that apply to any of this. So that's a little bit scary, knowing there's no regulations that involve or putting parameters on this type of research. So because they don't qualify as human research subjects or qualify as animals under existing law, there's a gray area that a lot of people are working in. So by building something whose inner life we cannot necessarily verify, and because we have never been able to verify inner life in anything, including each other, we just simply assume it. And the hard problem of consciousness isn't just a philosophy seminar puzzle. That's the reason we cannot answer the most important questions about what we are creating. Is there something like this going to be an organoid robotic body receiving signals, responding to an environment? I don't know, and we don't know. And the reason we don't know is research hasn't caught up. But the question may be permanent, structurally unanswerable with the tools we have as humans right now, or they may just store it away in a sealed box to where only they know. But making decisions about what to build and how complex to make it and what to do with it can lead to genuine darkness, because ignorance isn't going to fix it. Darkness that may be intrinsic to this really cynical problem that we're developing. And the hard problem of consciousness tells us that an experience cannot be explained from the outside. So you are conscious because you're living it. Everything else is an inference for you. We're building these new systems from human neural tissue and placing them in bodies and scaling their complexity while having no theory of what conscious even is. No way to detect it. And then, like I noted earlier, there's no legal framework to govern what we find in this scenario. So there's no argument for stopping it other than potential. So the medical potential is real. I see that and I hear it. And the scientific questions are genuinely important. But it's an argument for sitting with a question that most people haven't even asked. And at what point does inference become an obligation, right? When something is built from human neurons, mind you, it learns from its environment and it responds in ways we didn't fully program it to. What would you take for it? Someone might be home. I don't have the answer to that. Nobody does. And I think that's exactly why I'm asking it.